A lot of last week was spent talking about Geno Smith and Drew Lock. Is Geno Smith the problem for the Seahawks? How are the Seahawks going to compete with Geno Smith? And it became this ongoing conversation that everybody loves to have. Now, a lot of people can say I'm an over-optimist when it comes to the Seahawks, or I just love being overly positive. And I don't think that's necessarily the case. To me, do I think Geno Smith's a Super Bowl winning quarterback? Probably not. Do I think he's going to be our solution in 4 or 5 years? Clearly not. He's 34 years old now, I believe it is. So he's not the long-term solution. But to blame when we have bad losses just on Geno Smith was just not right. And we saw why this weekend against the Washington Commanders that Geno Smith is just fine in the role that he's being asked to play. We don't, as fans, sometimes like to deep dive and think about, is it the offensive line? How's the play calling? Is the defense doing its part? Is the coaching, the running game, the receivers doing their part? All these different things. We just want to figure out if we have Super Bowl winning quarterback or not. And that's not always how it works. I mean, right now, Josh Allen, for example, might be sitting at 5-5 after the Broncos Monday Night Football game. I don't know. It's mid-game right now, so don't quote me. It's halftime of that game. But even a guy like Josh Allen, he makes his own bad mistakes sometimes. The team's not as good as it was a few years ago. So the team just doesn't look as good, and it makes Josh Allen not look as good. Russell Wilson went to Denver, where the team was not as good as the Seattle Seahawks team, even though he thought he was going to a better situation, and he's looked a shell of himself. Now, I'm not always saying that it's the team's fault or the quarterback has no fault. Don't get me wrong. So a lot of times, quarterbacks can lose their touch. They get old. They had a spectacular year like Geno Smith. Some people might have said that was his one big year of his career, and that was it. That's what you think it happens sometimes. Don't get me wrong. But a lot of times we have to realize it's not always that. And sometimes it's depending how the team plays. It's depending how, everyone around him's playing. And Geno Smith against the Washington Commanders showed that when the opportunities are there and when the offensive line is there and when it's the right moment to make plays, he does. So I'm not saying you should sit here today and try to agree with me that or argue with me that he's a Super Bowl winning type of quarterback or that he's going to lead the Seahawks the next 5-6 years until he's 40 years old, like Tom Brady or Aaron Rodgers. That's fine. We're not here to say that. But as of right now, you can tell this team trusts him and he does what's right on the field a lot of the times. Yeah, he's had a couple weeks for bad interceptions, but he came out this week, fixed all that. He came out this week and threw for 369 yards, a career high for Geno Smith in a win with 2 touchdowns and no picks. And yes, there was a lot of times we settled for a field goal, but a lot of times it had to do with Geno Smith helping the team drive down the field to get into field goal position. And I think that's one big thing that it's a really big pro and con when watching football. Getting in field goal position is a really good thing for your offense to do. But if you're getting into field goal position always and never getting into the end zone, now it goes back to also blaming like the quarterback or the offense, right? Even though getting him in field goal position is a blessing to get into, right? You have a good offense if they can continually get you into field goal position. But when they don't capitalize enough, it's also their fault or they're a problem. So there's so many ways to look at field goal position and where the quarterback's getting or the red zone numbers or all these different things. But at the end of the day, the Seahawks are 6-3 with Geno Smith this year. Enough times, 6 wins, 3 losses, enough times he's got the team either into touchdown positions, he's got, the offense on the field long enough for the defense to get rest, or got us in field goal position. It hasn't been perfect, don't get me wrong, but it's been good. This week against Washington was better than many other weeks. And you have to look at it this way too. Yes, he only took 1 sack, and he had 369 yards and 2 touchdowns, no picks. I know you're going to say the first half. Okay, the first half was not pretty, but like I said, he got us to field goal position multiple times. 3 times we got a field goal in the first half. Those play a big difference when you win by 3. So those 3 times we got field goals is a big part of why we won the game by 3. He still came out in the second half and was good enough to put up a career high in passing yards. The dude even made the FedEx Aaron Ground Players of the Week. It's with Dak Prescott, Jared Goff, and Geno Smith this week. He was nominated. He's not going to win it because Dak had 404 yards. Jared Goff had 333 and 2 touchdowns, and probably was a little more consistent throughout the game. But the point is, no matter what you think about him, he did come out, he did compete, and he did play good. I think at the end of the day, the two other things, and Geno Smith was asked about this, and I think it's a compliment, but it could also mean like, see, I'm telling you guys, it hasn't been right all year. Geno Smith offered praise for the Seahawks offensive line and offensive coordinator Shane Waldron after the game. He said, it really started with protection. It started with play calling. Now, I'm not saying he's taking a shot in a negative way, in a dramatic way, but sometimes as a quarterback, he's probably saying, like, this is what I was looking for. The offensive line hasn't been pretty. And this was the first game out of since week 1 that we've had at least 4 out of our 5 starters. And when Abe Lucas comes back, we'll finally potentially, knock on wood, that's wood, we'll knock on wood have 5 out of 5 starters for the first time since the opening snap of the season. But he is saying, I've been looking to count on my protection and my play calling, and today it started with protection and play calling. And so it's not a shot, but it is a subtle way of saying, hey, I was expecting that, and when I got it, this is how I perform. And that's why he performed the way he did in the second half. Those stats I gave you, a lot of them are from the second half. 15 for 20, 217 yards, 2 touchdowns, both in the second half, with 0 picks and a 143.1 passer rating. So there's not much to complain about when it comes to Mr. Geno Smith. And his players, his teammates, trust him. When asked about it, Metcalf said he was lights out, bro. Geno, he's always gonna bounce back. Sorry. That's the great thing about him. That's what makes him so great and why he's so good at what he does. He doesn't listen to outside noise. He knows what we have in this locker room, and he knows there are people behind him that got his back. I'll tell you this. You do not say that unless you really believe in your guy. That's a wide receiver. I know a lot of people say Tyler Lockett's our number one or number 2. Him and DK are a very weird situation in the NFL that neither one's like the number 1 or number 2, but they're both number 1 type of dudes and teammates. But I say DK's our number 1 because it's always like the big guy, like the tall buffer one. That's the number 1 wide receiver. But he's our number 1 wide receiver, and he says that about the quarterback. That means he trusts him. And even on the defensive side, veteran, somebody the team looks up to, Jamal Adams. He said, even if you don't believe in Geno Smith, he and the Seahawks do. And today's finish reinforced that. And so not only do his teammates, his teammates believe in him, the coaching staff obviously believes him. They didn't think about putting in Drew Lock. They didn't put in Drew Lock in the fourth quarter of the Ravens game when, we were pretty much like, everybody in their fans like, oh, Ravens game, you got to put in Drew Lock because it's the fourth quarter and we're getting killed. At the end of the day, he killed it at the end of the game. That's the trust the team has in him, and that's why they don't put in Drew Lock. So us fans that are always begging for Drew Lock or, oh, my God, we suck without him, know a couple things. I think we'd be a little bit crazy if we thought before the season the Seahawks were going to win the Super Bowl. I'm not saying not compete. I'm not saying I don't want to compete. You can always potentially win a Super Bowl if you make it into the playoffs. Making into the playoffs always guarantees you a shot at it, right? Look at baseball, the Arizona Diamondbacks, the hat I'm wearing. And, they were the last seed in their side of the playoffs. The New York Giants, when they beat the Patriots in the Super Bowl, the last seed twice when they won the Super Bowl. So you never know if you get in. That's the big thing. But we should have known that this is not necessarily Geno Smith's not our quarterback for 3, 4, 5, 6 years. This team wasn't saying we have to win a Super Bowl now or bust. Chiefs, 49ers, like the Cowboys, teams like the Eagles that those are teams that are really Super Bowl or bust right now. And there's other teams that are trying to build to that spot. The Seahawks, the Lions, I don't know. Those are just 2 good examples of teams that are trying to stack some young talent and get really close to that spot where we can potentially be a Super Bowl champion, which means you possibly can early or you're competing to get better every single year. And that's what we're here for. So Geno Smith's perfect guy for that. Veteran, team loves him, players love him. makes big plays when he needs to, learned after 2 bad weeks, 3 bad weeks, whatever you want to call it, of making mistakes, he learned not to make mistakes. So, I mean, go ahead scoring drive, the one before they tied it up, he was 5 for 5, 50 yards and a touchdown. The game-winning drive, 4 for 5, 50 yards and a touchdown. In the field goal that he set up, he got helped the team set up for the field goal. And then on the day, 31 for 47, 369 yards and 2 touchdowns. The 13th most in Seahawks history in terms of passing yards. I mean, only Russell Wilson only did that twice. 369 yards or more. Only twice in his whatever amount of years. Was it 10 or 11 years with the Seahawks? 10 years. So don't sleep on Geno Smith and the Seahawks team. They have a very good shot of continuing to get better and right the ship throughout the year. And I think they're doing that. And I think they're doing it right before our eyes. We just got to stop worrying about Drew Lock or Geno Smith. Trust in Geno. Trust in this team. And I think we're pretty good. That's the honest truth. I love you all. Peace.